Please welcome the General Manager of Healthcare and Life Sciences at AWS, Dan Sheeran.
Imagine living in a world where if you had an important question that you needed to answer, but you did not have all the data you needed to answer that question, you needed to go find it, and it was very difficult because it was maybe printed out on paper. Or maybe the data that you need to answer that question doesn't even exist, and you had to manually go and create that data. Now, once you had your data and your questions, imagine if you had to go stand in line and wait until it was your turn to give your data and your questions to some specialist team that was going to actually go do the work for you. And then you just wait until they're done. And they say, "We have your answers you've been looking for." Well, guess what? That's the world we live in today. And even though it is in fact true that we have many AWS customers who are using generative AI technologies to do incredibly impressive things, like you see here, developing new drugs, developing new diagnostic tools, developing new clinical decision support systems using generative AI. That's all true. You know what's also true? At most of these customers, the vast majority of people are using the same technologies and the same methodologies that they were using before anybody had ever heard of generative AI. And that's tragic. It means we're not developing therapies as quickly as we could, or diagnostics, or clinical decision systems. And in the famous words of Dr. Paul Janssen, there is so much more to be done. The patients are waiting. Now, at AWS, we are in the fortunate position of working with thousands of healthcare and life sciences organizations all over the world, from startups to the largest biopharmaceutical companies, providers, payers, and the many technology companies that serve these organizations. And from our work with these many customers, we have seen that there are three main challenges that prevent our customers from realizing the full potential of AI and generative AI. First, it's often too hard to find and access the data needed to either train a model or make use of a model. Second, if the data doesn't even exist, generating the new data needed is too hard and is often still a manual process. Third, AI is just still too technical for most people. Often, a person with deep expertise in their own field, such as biology, clinical trial design, or medicine, can really only benefit from AI today if they also have expertise in training models, writing software pipelines, scaling compute infrastructure, if they want to be able to work at their own pace and not be the person standing in line waiting for some other team to do their work for them. Let me give you an example of this. You've probably heard of AlphaFold. Very powerful new model that's in use at most of our customers in life sciences. This is a scripting type interface. If somebody is not comfortable working in a scripting environment or with Python, what are they going to do? They're going to be the person standing in line. So for too many of our customers, their experience of AI is much like what the experience with mainframes and access to mainframes would have been like in the 1960s. Now, at AWS, we have been working for many years in two different ways, creating tools and systems that our customers can use to tackle all three of these challenges. The first is the AI and data services you've been hearing about all week. Amazon Bedrock, Amazon SageMaker, and there's a handful of less well-known but very important services we have that lend themselves to these particular problems. Amazon Data Zone is one, AWS Cleanrooms is another. In addition, for about 5 years, we have been building industry-specific, fit-for-purpose services for the unique needs of healthcare and life sciences customers, for the data formats, for the metadata schema, for the regulatory compliance needed to operate in the healthcare and life sciences industries. And those investments that we and our customers who use these services have been making for several years now are precisely the things that enable our customers to go faster when it comes to using AI and democratizing access to AI for their customers. Now, customers who want to take advantage of these services, both the general purpose AI and Gen AI services and our fit-for-purpose services for healthcare and life sciences, need to take one first step, and that's to get their data to the cloud. It's funny, I often say the best thing that ever happened for most of our customers was for the CIO to get excited about AI, because now the CIO is telling everyone, you've got to do everything possible so we can take advantage of this, which is giving our customers in the digital and IT organizations the support they need to do the things they wanted to be doing anyway. Getting data to the cloud is the first step, because only when the data is in the cloud can you take advantage of the elasticity, the security, and the availability that allows data science and AI to happen at scale. Now, one customer who's really showing how to do this right is Johnson & Johnson. Starting in 2010, J&J was one of the first pharma customers to adopt AWS, and we've had a strategic collaboration ever since. Today, J&J follows a cloud-first strategy. J&J set a goal to move 50% of their applications to the cloud by 2025, and they've blown past that. In fact, they've also seen a 5x increase in cloud adoption just since 2019. This activity has had significant business impact. So today, J&J is using the cloud in their biosignatures platform to support small molecule drug discovery, in their safety platform to manage adverse events, and in physics-based modeling and simulation for their orthopedics research. Now, by moving to the cloud and adopting our generative AI and Gen AI services, AWS customers are accelerating innovation across the continuum, from R&D to diagnosis and treatment, and then even on supporting patients over their health journey. Let's start by talking about R&D. So how are new drugs discovered? Well, the first step, as many of you know, is called target identification. And this is where you identify and validate a biological molecule or a cellular process that plays a crucial role in causing a disease, and one that can be targeted by a drug. This is typically called a receptor. This is an enormously complex challenge because it requires many different types of data, as you can see. And the data that is required is often spread over many, many different data sources. So this creates these two of the three challenges I referenced before. How do you find all of that data? And then how does somebody who is not super technical make use of that data for target identification? The reason this is so challenging is that in this type of work, the researcher cannot predetermine what data they're going to need or from what source. They often spend hundreds of hours searching through different data stores, and this results in a very dynamic and multi-step workflow where each step depends on what they found at the prior step. Now, in theory, data catalogs and automation should be able to help this problem a lot. In reality, it usually does not happen. And I'm going to talk about both why it doesn't happen and the solutions we've been developing. So let's talk about data catalogs first. With data catalogs, they've been hindered by incomplete and incompatible metadata schema. Within one organization, different teams develop their own schema. Automation systems have often required rigid rules that have lacked memory retention for learning. So on the first problem about data catalogs, we introduced the Amazon Data Service a couple years ago, and since then, we've seen very successful use by this service by healthcare and life sciences customers such as Natera, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Guardant. And because the problem that DataZone directly addresses is twofold. Number one, harmonizing disparate metadata, for which we use LLMs inside of DataZone. And secondly, providing governed access. It's often the case that even within one enterprise, it is not appropriate for one team to access another team's data unless the appropriate permissions have been put in place. And when they haven't, it's too manual of a process. So Amazon DataZone automates all of that, and we're seeing widespread adoption. It's a wonderful example of how LLMs inside of many of our services are tackling this problem. So that is the data catalog challenge. Now, the automation challenge is another example where we're applying generative AI technologies. Generative AI autonomous agents address the weaknesses of prior automation systems. And they do this because they can intelligently automate tasks where the workflow is not predetermined. Agents take a complicated task, break it down into individual steps, where each step is not predetermined, but rather is decided on the fly by the agent based on what information it found in the prior step. Now, by connecting these autonomous AI agents to both internal data stores and external data sources, we can really speed up the entire target identification process. Amazon Bedrock Agents was introduced last year at re:Invent, and we've had multiple customers using it since then to address this particular problem because it is so well suited for these dynamic research activities in which the workflow is not predetermined. Today, I'm excited to share the work we've been doing in particular with one such customer, Genentech, to help them implement their own research agent on Bedrock, which couples internal and external tools to rapidly identify targets for new medicines and biomarkers for trials.
Patients are waiting for better medicines. They're waiting for medicines that are safer so that they have less side effects and adverse events. They're waiting for medicines for diseases for which there is no medicine today. They want to live longer lives and they want to live better lives. And the thing that stands between patients and those things is the enormous difficulty of developing new medicines. There's thousands of different cell types and states in the human body. There's 20,000 genes in the genome. There's 10 to the 60 different small molecules with medicine-like properties. There's maybe 20 to the power of 32 possible antibodies with therapeutic-like properties. You can't actually enumerate all these possibilities just one by one. You can do it in a lab for sure. You can't do it with the entire human population on the face of the planet. And you can't even do all of it on a computer. And because the space is so big, because the challenge is so vast, we cannot simply rely on our ability to do experiments. People are really smart, but we are not infinite. We need extra help, and generative AI gives us this extra help.
We've had great relationship with AWS to build a research agent that is really fit for purpose for our scientists across Genentech and across so many different disciplines. Working together with Amazon Bedrock, we've been able to build links to relevant databases so that we can query them. So a typical scientific workflow will start by looking through a particular database, then a second, then a third, typically applying a particular computational method to analyze that data. What an agent in principle allows you to do is to automate this process. Until relatively recently, tools such as generative AI have really been the preserve of computational scientists who had the expertise to execute them. One of the things that I'm especially excited about, however, through the development of tools such as autonomous agents, is the ability to democratize access to data sets, to computational tools, so that they're accessible to scientists who have maybe got less computational background, but who, through interacting with an agent in a really iterative and coherent way, are able to take advantage of these tools and use that to directly accelerate their research.
We are putting the amazing capabilities and knowledge of AWS, both around autonomous agents and LLMs themselves, but also around how data and the cloud and tools operate. And in this, the agent really gives us an unbelievable boost in the work that we're trying to achieve. They are able to reason. They know information. They have memory of past event. They can execute actions. And they can do some of this work. One of the reasons we're really excited about agents is that we actually believe that they help our scientists do better. They can't replace our scientists. They actually boost our scientists. The really cool part happens when you let the agent and our top performer scientists work together. Then they perform together far better than our best scientists. And that means that our best scientists is now a better version of themselves. We make our people able to see things they couldn't see before, and we give our people time to use their unique and very special brains to do those things that only humans can do. That brilliance, that creativity, that pushing to the limit that is decidedly and uniquely human.
Of course, the ultimate benefit of this is that we're able to identify targets and to design studies that are going to get medicines to patients faster. And that's really the core of our mission here in Genentech.
Thanks, Aviv and John. We're all incredibly excited about the many ways agentic AI can help drug researchers identify drug targets, such as cell receptors, the ones that John just spoke about. Now, what once took a scientist weeks can now be done in minutes. Genentech estimates that this is going to help them automate 43,000 hours per year, nearly 5 person-years per year of time when extended across their entire enterprise. Incredibly exciting. So that's target identification. As many of you know, the next step in the drug discovery and development process is identifying the molecule that's going to hit that target. This is lead identification. Now, drug leads have already shown, perhaps more than any other area, the ability to benefit from agentic AI and from other forms of generative AI. So we're going to talk about this now for just a few minutes. The power of generative AI and AI to impact lead identification is so powerful that it resulted in this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry, which was awarded to the teams and people who have developed the AI models that are most commonly used for identifying and qualifying leads. These algorithms fall into 2 broad categories: generative models, which design new biological molecules like proteins, and predictive models, which predict key properties a given molecule needs to have, such as its structure or its function. The ability of these generative and predictive models to dramatically speed up key steps in the drug design process has been so powerful that it's spawned many additional subcategories of models that researchers are developing all the time for different types of generation and different types of prediction. This shows you some of them. There is so much enthusiasm around this that for each of those classes of models, there are literally dozens of new models appearing almost every month. In fact, it's gotten to the point you can't even keep up with it. And that's a shame, because what that means is there might be a spectacular new model that's just the right thing for a researcher to solve the problem they're focused on that they don't have the time to learn about, test, and then incorporate into their workflow. We're going to talk about two such new models here briefly. The ESM3 model and Amplify. ESM3 from evolutionary scale generates new proteins with an unprecedented degree of control. You can enter any any two of the three inputs of structure, sequence, or function, and the ESM3 model will give you the missing third one. This allows you to design novel proteins not found in nature or a potential scaffold for the active site of a protein enzyme. Amgen and Mila recently released Amplify, a new open source AI protein language model. It uses a small model approach to enable faster inference. It's available on AWS for researchers to run inference and also to fine-tune with their own data. Now, to design a molecule that binds to a target with all of the needed properties, you actually need to use multiple models from different classes. You need to combine them in a workflow. So I'm going to walk through one of the more common workflows that we see today in use among our customers, focusing on these four models. Two of them are generative, and two of them are predictive. So typically, this workflow will look as follows. The researcher will start with the structure of the target and want a protein that has been shown previously to be close to, but not exactly what will work in hitting that target. Those are the two inputs. The researcher inputs both of those into the RF diffusion model, which is one of the ones that was developed at the Baker Lab that resulted in the Nobel Prize. Now, RF diffusion then generates multiple high-level designs for new proteins that might work. Those high-level designs are then fed into another model from the Baker Lab called protein MPNN, which completes the design, much more fully detailed protein designs. But at that point, you have thousands or often even millions of designs. So what do you do with millions of designs? This is where the predictive models come in, because different models will help predict different properties, whether that's the function, whether that's the structure, binding affinity, et cetera. And so how to get down to the best 5 or 10 or 20 candidates that you would then synthesize and then go test in a wet lab is what these predictive models allow you to do. And the results of using multiple predictive models allows you to then rank them according to various criteria. The problem is this is a very complex thing to stand up. And because it's complex to stand up, when these new models appear that I showed you a couple of slides ago, it's just too much work to try to grab one of those and then update a workflow that you spent already weeks building. This is the reason we've developed AWS HealthOmics. HealthOmics frees up biologists to do biology instead of writing and managing pipelines. And we built it to build, automate, and scale biology workflows. Originally omics workflows, and over the past year, we've expanded it in order to orchestrate AI biology workflows. We've pre-configured it with the most common workflows and models like the ones I've just shown, but you can also bring your own models. For example, I know many of you use lots of technologies from our partner NVIDIA. And NVIDIA, as you know, has their BioNeMo and NIMS microservices. And their implementation of RF diffusion is twice as fast as the open source version. So if you wanted to use that in place of the current open source version that you already have in a pipeline, if you're using AWS Health Omics, it's a very simple drop-in replacement. Now, to hear from one of our AWS customers that's using AWS Health Omics to automate AI biology workflows, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage, and please help me, Matt Studney, Vice President of Research R&D IT at Merck.
Thanks, Dan. Great to be here.
So Matt, tell us about ways in which Merck today is using Health Omics to speed up drug design through AI biology models.
Yeah, we had a great talk the other day with Aaron Friedman from AWS and Danny Bitton from Merck, where we talked a lot more detail about this capability. But ultimately, together with the AWS Health Omics team, we developed a cutting-edge Gen AI pipeline for protein design. The pipeline integrates RF diffusion models, protein language models, and integrates AlphaFold structure prediction, which allows us to design novel molecules with unprecedented speed and scale. Applications range across vaccine development, diagnostics, discovery of new drugs, and biocatalysis. Really, this represents a potential new frontier in medicine, where these advanced technologies can redefine what's possible. And we can create proteins, peptides, and enzymes in silico with desirable properties that are really not found in nature. And some of this is actually already being validated in our wet labs, which is why we do what we do.
That's fantastic, Matt. And you've been a great partner of ours in helping us really make sure that that Health Omics works for your researchers. Now, as you know, once we've designed a drug, the next step in getting it to patients is clinical trials. Now, and for most of our customers, clinical trials represent 65 to 70% of both the time and the cost of developing a new drug. And that's why so many of our customers are focused on how to liberate the data, get it into the cloud, and be able to use modern analytics and AI to speed up those processes. So can you share with us your own journey at Merck about how you're modernizing your data infrastructure and clinical data sets to achieve these goals?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do so. Thanks, Dan. So we have a program at Merck called Zero Gravity. What is that, and why do we name it that? Well, our most important transformational program that's taking place at Merck right now, where we are redefining our business processes and technology stack for clinical trials, is called Zero Gravity. We're modernizing our tech architecture and capabilities, and it's a multi-year effort where we're probably 2 years in that's going to affect the jobs of thousands of people within our research labs. And the reason we called it Zero Gravity is because we've tried this before, but we collapsed under the weight of the complexity of what we've already built. The case for change is pretty obvious. We needed to simplify our current state architecture. We needed to have more agility. Right now, when things get thrown at us, whether it's a pandemic or a new trial design, it's very hard to change and evolve our systems to reflect what we need to do to run that type of clinical trial. Efficiency. There's a lot of friction in the process, from study builds to starting up sites to executing the trials, collecting the data, cleaning the data, analyzing the data, major opportunities to make that more efficient. And that allows us to focus more on what we do best, which is discover and develop drugs. So those business drivers really allow us to reduce that integration and system complexity. Right now, we have probably 200 applications and systems. So imagine the middleware. Imagine when something breaks. How long does it take to actually get it back up and running? And if we're delayed a day in a clinical trial that is successful, that's a day where we delay patient access to that life-saving medication. So it's very serious for us to get this right. We have to adopt to those clinical trial innovations. We have new modalities, we have new patient targets, and we need to be able to get this all done faster and more efficiently with higher quality. The increase in R&D productivity and user satisfaction and user experience is a key one I already alluded to. We, the sites we work with, and the whole ecosystem can use the benefits of an efficient platform like the one we're building. And ultimately, going to a SaaS model with cloud architecture will allow us to keep things current, upgrade regularly, debug issues, and move on to the most important things. The approach we took was first to have a business capability platform. We selected Viva Vault Clinical Suite. That's for things like electronic data capture, clinical trial management system, study startup. Those capabilities are core to what we do. Second is the clinical data layer. And even though we're going with Viva, we already have other ecosystems in play, both internally and when we acquire companies or work with other companies. So we always needed a place where we can ingest data from any source, any format, transform it to the standards we need it, and then to allow our users to consume it. And this is not a simple process. It's highly regulated, lots of challenges that have taken place over the years that we've addressed, but we need to make this a lot more seamless and frictionless. And we chose Amazon Web Services to partner with us on this clinical data layer because they bring a tech stack expertise and an architecture that we know will make all those things possible. Right now, we've already launched the capability to do encoding, blinding, masking. We're really close to having all database lock capabilities that we need. And we're doing that with Bedrock and the Anthropic models. The more difficult outcome that we're trying to achieve is an SDTM engine, where you've got dynamic standards sitting in the world of clinical trial design and the standards at which we need to analyze this, because the trials are getting more complex, the drugs are getting more specific, we're looking at very specific mutations, the data is exploding, the images are getting larger, and we're going to need to be able to make that happen with a lot less manual effort. And so far, in some of the pilots we've done, we've seen increases in accuracy that get us to the 90% of what we need in the final outcome. And it's been a great partnership. We're looking forward to continuing this. We're going to hope that this can get productized and that other people can sign up. So you too, in the audience that work in pharma, should take this approach as well. So thanks, Dan.
Thank you so much, Matt.
You're welcome.
Speeding up clinical trials, incredibly important for getting therapies to patients faster. Now, I'm just going to spend a minute on something that I know is a very hot topic for our life sciences organizations and customers, and also, I think, of increasing importance and visibility among healthcare providers, and that is real-world data. Real-world data is using de-identified patient data that originates in a provider environment for various different purposes in the life sciences organization. It's a key part of the target identification that John and Aviv from Genentech spoke about. It also plays a key part in clinical trials, in things like identifying which sites would be potentially a good place to conduct a trial, and which patients are likely to be responsive to a given new therapy. There are many uses for real-world data also in the commercial part of life sciences. Today, the process of identifying, licensing, and then using real-world data inside the life sciences organization as real-world evidence, although it's extremely important, it's also extremely painful. And that's largely because all of the data about one patient, all the different types of data you need for that patient longitudinally does not exist in one place. And because it does not exist in one place, the third parties that play the role of aggregating data from multiple provider systems typically have incomplete data. That makes searching for that data extremely difficult. And it also means after the data has been licensed, harmonizing data from different sources is difficult and extremely time-consuming and manual because those aggregators do not use the same metadata schema. So we announced a partnership several months ago with our partner Datavant, squarely focused on tackling this problem. It uses Datavant's token technologies and other services. It uses AWS clean rooms, and it uses generative AI to automate that metadata cleanup. We're very excited about this. Just wanted to get this on your radar, as we'll have more to talk about this in 2025. Now, although drug discovery and development advances from AI are incredibly exciting, of course, it doesn't really have any patient impact unless we can diagnose the patient accurately and get the right therapy to the right patient. Now, here too, AI is playing a tremendous role in accelerating. And there's two main areas that we're seeing it help address the challenges that exist today in the clinical environment. The first is the many challenges around generating new data. There's a lot of manual data generation happening today in the clinical environment, particularly with healthcare providers needing to type into the electronic medical record. The second, again, the same theme of AI is too technical. So we're going to talk about the two areas within the clinical environment that are the most important to improve on in order for AI to reach its full potential. The first is electronic medical records, and the second is medical imaging. Now, there are many reasons to move the electronic medical record to the cloud before you even get to the use of AI. The cloud is more secure, it is more scalable, and in an era of ransomware attacks, having your data in the cloud where you have you can be very confident about backups, where we have all of the tools available at AWS for data security and data privacy, really are a key first step in securing your data. We were very excited this week to announce a new service specifically around data security called AWS Security Incident Response, which really automates all the activities related to preparing, responding to, and recovering from security incidents. But that's really just to get started. Once you can get a lot of your data onto the cloud, you can then take advantage of the ability to apply advanced analytics for a longitudinal view of the patient. We have seen a tremendous amount of progress in the past year in healthcare providers, particularly those who use Epic systems, moving their systems from on-premises onto AWS. And we couldn't be more excited about the gains that they have seen, the benefits they have seen, including 100% availability of the patient chart, 25% better performance, and 30% savings versus on-prem. Now, these are some of the reasons why AWS was named as the leader in cloud performance by KLAS Research just a few weeks ago. AWS has the highest overall performance score of 94 out of 100, and that's because of a combination of technology, speed, and support. Respondents praised AWS for its high-performing products, rapid deployment speeds, and the exceptional expertise of AWS teams. As I said, once the data is in the cloud, then it becomes possible to do analytics and AI at a scale and a pace previously not possible. And the reason for this is because of one of those fit-for-purpose services that I described earlier in my talk today. Several years ago, we launched AWS Health Lake. AWS Health Lake is a HIPAA-eligible service that provides FHIR APIs that help customers securely store, transform, transact, and analyze healthcare data in minutes. It enables a chronological view at both the patient and population level. We're seeing excellent progress in EMR for all the reasons that I just stated. But as I said, the other key source of data that we need to move to the cloud and apply analytics and machine learning to and AI to is medical imaging. Now, medical imaging is X-rays, CT scans, MRIs, sonograms. They're absolutely essential in diagnosing many of the most common diseases. However, they're particularly challenging, even more so than EMR data. Why? The files are massive, number one. Number two, the files are often stuck in legacy on-premises silos, both within one institution, and then they're spread over multiple institutions because the patient doesn't always just go to one location for their imaging. Now, the good news is many healthcare systems, just as in the case of EMR, are also moving medical imaging to the cloud to get past these challenges. We have been working, both we and those providers have been working with the leading medical imaging companies, the ones the providers know and trust that have their data today, we've been working very intensely to facilitate that cloud journey. And the reason we're able to do that is because of our long-term investment in another fit-for-purpose healthcare and life sciences managed service we offer at AWS called AWS Health Imaging. I'm going to talk about two customers and their use of AWS Health Imaging and other AWS analytics and AI and machine learning services because of the transformative impact they can have. We've had a long-standing strategic relationship with GE Healthcare. Earlier this year, we announced an expansion of that relationship under which GE is training multiple foundation models for medical imaging on AWS, specifically on SageMaker. This week, we were incredibly excited when GE Healthcare announced the industry's first 3D full-body MR foundation model. And the reason this is so profoundly important is with foundation models, instead of needing to train a separate model every time for a specific disease in a specific organ, you can train one FM that can be used to generate a near infinite number of discrete models for multiple types of diseases in multiple organs. It will radically speed up our ability to apply AI in the clinical environment. We also have a long-standing, very strategic relationship with Philips. Just last week, we announced an expansion of this relationship under which Philips will be moving their radiology, digital pathology, and cardiology systems to the cloud, both their installed base, of which they've already moved 150 sites, and net new cloud-native services. This is going to enable that longitudinal and also multimodal view of the patient, where the provider can look at the digital pathology, the medical imaging, the electronic medical record, all in an integrated fashion with advanced visualization. We're very excited about these announcements. Now, I talked about the many challenges in the clinical environment of manual data creation. And there's no place that's a bigger challenge than clinical documentation. This is whether that's in a consult or even in the medical imaging that I just described. In both cases, either during the appointment or after looking at the scans and creating the study, the provider needs to enter information into some system. Today, that is done typically via typing or through relatively unsophisticated voice recognition systems. This is where LLMs and generative AI really scale and can have an enormous impact. And the reason why it's so important that we take advantage of that is because clinical documentation today is the burden from clinical documentation is the #1 driver of healthcare provider burnout and people leaving the profession at a time when we actually need more healthcare providers. So to talk about not just the potential, but the reality of what generative AI can do to address the clinical documentation burden, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Ruben Amarsingham, founder and CEO of Pieces Technology, and Dr. Amy Merlino, Chief Medical Information Officer at the Cleveland Clinic. Amy, can you please introduce yourself and your role at the Cleveland Clinic and your perspective on the opportunities and challenges around clinical documentation?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So I'm Amy Merlino. As you mentioned, I serve as the Chief Medical Information Officer at the Cleveland Clinic. I'm also a practicing maternal fetal medicine specialist, so continue my clinical practice as well. The way I describe the CMIO role is really that I'm a translator between technical teams and the clinical teams, and really work to try to identify technical solutions that will augment and improve our care and the way we deliver that care. One important part of medical care is clinical documentation. And at a high level, this is really to capture the care and medical decision-making of the provider. We have added to that, though, it's not just for patient care, but also communication, quality reporting, compliance, billing. Adding all of this in addition to all that data you've just shared from our EMR that's now available for us, it really makes going through the patient's chart and creating this documentation really a burden on our providers. And one of the things that folks say is really leading to clinician burnout. So balancing that thoroughness and efficiency and meeting all the requirements put on the providers really is a big challenge. And I do think that some of these AI tools that are coming out are really going to give us some great opportunities to alleviate these burdens.
Fantastic. Ruben, can you tell us some of the ways that Pieces is helping healthcare providers with this challenge?
Thank you, Dan. So that's Pieces' mission as a healthcare AI firm is to help those who help others. So that's doctors, nurses, all these amazing care professionals that are taking care of patients day in and day out. And so we're using predictive modeling, generative AI, adversarial AI, and as you alluded to earlier, increasingly agentic AI to reduce the clinical documentation burden, as Amy talked about, and improve clinical communication. And so for us, that involves notes, helping doctors write their notes, summarizations, discharge summaries. And so as an example, one of the two use cases that we are working with the Cleveland Clinic on is one is called the Pieces Working Summary. And so this is a summarization of a patient's entire record in the hospital, summarized into 100 or 200 words in a clinical lens. So just imagine the patient's in the hospital for 4 or 5 days, that could be hundreds of pages of documentation. It could be thousands of pages if it's a really complicated case. And the goal of the AI is to summarize that information every 2 to 15 minutes in a clinical format that physicians can incorporate very quickly. Another example is a discharge summary. So the discharge summary is a really important clinical document where physicians have to complete this at the time of the hospitalization. And the goal there is to take the entire hospital course and summarize it for the next physician that's going to be receiving the patient as an outpatient. It's incredibly important for clinical care, for handoffs, for movement from the inpatient to the ambulatory side, but it takes a lot of time. And so we're finding by drafting these discharge summaries at a very high level of accuracy for the physicians, we're saving 60 to 90 minutes for physicians in the hospital on a clinical shift. So why is this so important in working with the Bedrock system? So Pieces is completely deployed on Bedrock. And what we're finding is we're supporting doctors from neurosurgery, cardiothoracic surgery, pediatrics, OB-GYN, across the gamut of specialties. And the capability to use different LLMs for different clinical cognitive tasks is paramount. What we're finding is the behavior pattern of these LLMs are really applicable in different situations. And so part of the job of the AI is to help determine that, and the Bedrock system has been tremendous for that. The second part with AWS is obviously the importance of the security and maintaining in complex environments the security and privacy of this data. We layer on top of that adversarial systems. So adversarial AI that's checking the AI of the first generative AI output to look for clinical errors, and then combining that with a double human-in-the-loop system to have clinicians check on the output of the AI before it goes into the clinical field. By doing that, you can really get the error rates constrained to a very low level.
That's fantastic. Amy, can you tell us what excites you about the partnership and what progress you've seen?
Yeah, so one of the things that's been really exciting is the early success we've seen with the Pieces discharge summaries. So we've deployed this for a set of users at our Cleveland Clinic main campus and also at our Martin campus, which is one of our regional facilities. At the main campus, we use it on our teaching service, which has residents and the staff physicians taking care of really complex patients. And it was interesting, we found they actually look at that discharge summary, the longer summary, every day to keep up to date with what's happening with the patient, and they curate the discharge summary over time. At our regional hospital at Martin, we noticed that they're really interacting with it near that time of discharge, and almost 90% of the time, the discharge summaries are produced with this draft from Pieces. And they're being done significantly faster, which, as Ruben mentioned, is really key to that transition of care and safely getting our patients handed off to the next place. So some of the feedback we've heard, one physician said, previously people were spending an incredible amount of time on documenting the hospital course, and you've given us that time back. And another said it's incredibly useful when taking over for a patient or if you're gone for a day or so. That's when we found the summary most useful. The other thing that was really exciting is some of the unanticipated ways we're using the PISA summary. For instance, we have a rapid response team. So when a patient's deteriorating or having a significant clinical event, we bring in a team of caregivers who specialize in that emergency care but don't know the patient at all. And we found that being able to provide them with that real-time summary of the patient really helps them to have a heads up on what's going on with the patient to make more informed decisions about how to execute that critical care in that really complicated situation. So I think it's really highlights that these summaries can be used in all sorts of different workflows that we haven't really thought about yet.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. I couldn't be more excited about how we're addressing the clinical documentation burden by partnering with leading healthcare organizations and technology vendors.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Quicker.
So that's incredibly exciting, but as you all know, even once we have the right therapy diagnosed for a given patient, the patient will only benefit from that if they actually are able to access that therapy. And to hear more about how to transform patient access to therapies, I'm very excited to introduce you to a customer that we think is really at the leading edge for this problem.
You'll get better when you're not blamed for a condition you can't control. You'll get better when your care doesn't depend on your income. You'll get better when your pain isn't minimized, dismissed, forgotten. We will never stop trying to get better. Because when medicine gets better, all of us can get better.
If that didn't feel like a normal pharmaceutical ad, it wasn't supposed to be one. We want to do something different. My name is Diogo Rao, and I am the Chief Information and Digital Officer of Lilly. We are a medicine company. The problem with traditional pharma ads, and we have plenty of them, is they're usually two people out on the lawn playing with a dog. It's a happy time with a jingle. But if you've ever been diagnosed with something, if your parent, your child, your partner has been diagnosed with something, it's a scary, confusing time. It is not a happy time because life is tough. There are so many different obstacles that we put in the way, and we wanted to take a different tone. The first thing is a bunch of confusion that sets in. But then you have the hurdles of first, getting a doctor appointment, second, figuring out if you can pay for it, and then third, physically getting the medicine that you need. Those are three huge barriers. Now, the first barrier of finding a doctor appointment is something all of us here can relate to. We've all said, you know what, I'm going to do something about this, and I'm going to make a doctor appointment, and then first available is like in June, right? Well, the second problem, the problem of payment, is something that we all know about. We've all seen outrageous prices for medicines. But only some of us here have probably struggled to pay for them. That is not the case for so many Americans around the country, because in the United States, we've decided to take a very different model from the rest of the world. Very different from Canada, very different from Europe. And we've said that the cost of medicines should be really placed on the patient itself. That is not the same for everything in the healthcare industry, but it is especially true of medicines. If you go to the hospital right now, you are going to have to pay something out of pocket. You're going to have to pay, if you have good insurance, you're going to have to pay about 3% on average out of pocket. If you go to the pharmacy to get some medicine, maybe some life-saving medicine, you're again going to have to pay out of pocket. But this time, you're going to have to pay 20%. And that disparity of 3% to 20% is just perverted economics. It makes absolutely no sense. Why should you pay more for medicines that will keep you from going to the hospital instead? This is why we need to do something different. So I did not come from the life sciences industry. I've been in it for about 3.5 years. Before that, I was at Apple, where I led engineering for our retail and our online stores. We had a different set of problems there. But coming here, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to change the way that all of this works, and that's what brought me here today. By the way, I forgot to go back to my third challenge. Our third challenge is actually physically getting the medicine. This is one that actually we cannot, that probably most of us here cannot relate to, but is a huge problem across this country. About 46% of the United States is a pharmacy desert. 45 million Americans live in what we call a pharmacy desert. The definition of a pharmacy desert is a place where you have to drive 15 minutes to get to the nearest pharmacy. Not necessarily a good pharmacy, not necessarily a pharmacy that has the medicine that you want, but just any pharmacy. And that's 15 minutes assuming that you've got a car already parked out front. If you don't have the money to have your own car and you have to take the bus, you have to walk, you have a wheelchair, it's a lot more than 15 minutes, and that's a very real barrier. So those three problems all together, being able to get an appointment with a doctor, finding a way to pay, and then physically getting the medicine, those are three barriers that we absolutely, positively have to change. We have made the first step here at Lilly. I believe we should bring that whole period down from months, from when you decide you want to get a medicine to when you actually can take it, from months all the way down to a single day, maybe even a few hours. We've taken that first step with what we call Lilly Direct. Lilly Direct is something that we believe is the first of its kind in the pharmaceutical industry. It's going straight to the consumer. That is not something that this industry knows a lot about. But now, if you are living with obesity or weight management, diabetes or migraines, you can immediately search for an independent doctor that's near you or arrange a telehealth appointment from an independent doctor. When I say independent, I mean a doctor that is not paid by Lilly or employed by Lilly. And the best part is, especially with telehealth, you may even be able to make that appointment today. So problem number one, getting access to a doctor, we've got that solved. Problem number two, which was coverage and being able to pay for it, I wish I could tell you we could solve it. We cannot solve it ourselves, but we can definitely make it a lot better. As it turns out, it's not unusual for cash payments of medicines to even be cheaper than what they are on your insurance plan. So we make it possible for people to do cash payments, do no prior authorizations, and be able to speed through the process. Now, problem number three is getting the medicine. Now, with Lilly Direct, you can get the medicine at your nearest pharmacy, or you can get it shipped to you at home or wherever you would like. Just like Amazon doesn't sign you up for one specific or tell you have to use one database or one large language model, we don't do the same thing either. We say you can use whatever pharmacy you want, and if you want to even use this one, you can, of course, use Amazon Pharmacy. I actually personally use it. It's a great one. But with that, we can now say that problem number three of being able to get the medicine that you need physically, we've got that one solved. You can literally get months back in your health. And this is a huge deal. I can't understate how big of a deal this is. But this is a tech talk, and we are here with a bunch of tech folks. One of the things I wanted to mention is that we did all of this in 2 6-week sprints. We did this by building it all on top of AWS. If we had tried to go outside and work with a systems integrator or bring in a bunch of other consultants, we would have spent 12 weeks just on the procurement process itself. So I wanted to show you how it works. No tech talk is complete without an architecture diagram. So I would love to take you through every box here over the next 35 minutes, if you're all good with that. I'm just, of course, joking, but what I will mention is that our AWS services are driving all of this. We've got an event-driven architecture with SQS. We've got, on the database side, we've got RDS, DynamoDB. We bring all of that together into our data and analytics platform, which is powered by a whole host of AWS services. We also run this on Red Hat OpenShift as our foundation, and we made that and other design choices to be able to get containerization and orchestration. This was something that was essential for us for being able to scale from day one. And I will say this is also a little bit different from how things have always worked in the pharma industry. We wanted to have that e-commerce-like experience where, you know what, if we suddenly ramp up to 1 million customers, we can do that. But really, the best part about all of this is that what we built here, this whole architecture diagram, although it says LillyDirect on it, it's not really just LillyDirect. It's a whole set of reusable infrastructure that we can apply to a bunch of other projects. I'll also mention that we did design this at mobile first as a progressive web app. And the other thing is we designed it with accessibility in mind from the start. And before everybody rolls their eyes and says, well, of course, everything's designed with accessibility, in the pharma industry, the healthcare industry, it is absolutely not the case that things are designed with accessibility from the start. And to prove that to yourself, just open up any medicine you have, and you'll find a set of instructions for use, which are folded like origami style, which anybody with a motor disorder is not going to be able to unfold. They're written in one language, so if English is not your native language, you're not going to be able to follow along. If you're neurodiverse, the instructions are so dense, you also won't use them. And then, of course, what font size is it? It's like font size 6, so if you've got low vision, you're out of luck. This is not an industry that has been built on accessibility, and we wanted to change all of that. Putting all of this together, though, it's an incredibly exciting time. Everything you heard Dan talk about at the beginning on the discovery side, I would love to talk to you about more. But none of it matters unless people take the medicine that they need to save their lives. And so I would just encourage all of you, don't put off that doctor appointment you've been putting off for a while. Go visit your doctor, get the medicine you need, take care of yourselves, take care of your family. We only get one life to live. We only get one body. Thank you.
You know, you only get one body. It might be the perfect size to do this. Your body may take up a lot of space, or have to speak with its hands. But no matter what body you're born with, you only get one. Let's fight like hell for it.
I can't think of a better way to finish our time together today. We spent the past hour, and thank you for your time with us, talking about all of the ways AWS and our partners and our customers are using cloud, AI, generative AI technologies to transform every aspect of the continuum of R&D, diagnosis and treatment, and of course, supporting patients on their journey, as Diogo so eloquently just shared with us. And the reason why we could not be more excited about the future is that we are seeing every month a greater impact. And although it's fun to see and exciting to see the impact with providers, and it's incredibly fun, especially for those of us who are really into advanced technologies in biology, the impact that we're seeing in life sciences, it's truly only when the patient is impacted that we all are achieving our mission. And I know so many of you, I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd. I know many of you chose your profession because of the impact that you wanted to have on patients, and you're doing it. And so thank you for spending time with us today, and have a great reInvent.